Yo, Cultural Confederates! So happy Monday. Welcome back to the channel. Now, sorry I haven't posted my Sunday night video yet. It's taken a really long time for it to upload. See if I can try to upload it at work. I don't know if it's something with our Wi-Fi or YouTube. But that's coming. So you'll get a double dose today if that doesn't upload here in a little bit. I'll just upload these two videos at work. But I want to talk about the lost cause. And this is actually a reaction to a video I saw here just a short time ago on YouTube. It's from Threads from the National Tapestry. It's the name of the podcast. And it's a really good podcast. Really well produced. Very informative. And I'm an open-minded guy. I can look at, things from different angles. But when you're talking about the Civil War, you have to look at the Civil War from the perspective of what life was like back in 1861 for people both in the South and the North. And at the time, let's just address this right out. Slavery was legally recognized under the U.S. Constitution. And it was still legal in the United States, legally recognized from 1861 to 1865. So that means all during the Civil War, slavery was still recognized and practiced in some states in the North, i.e. New Jersey. Now, there's been some debate about how many slaves were in the state of New Jersey, but a lot of these slaves weren't counted on the census because by that time in 1860, a lot of them had moved up the ladder, so to speak, and had entered these apprenticeships. So that didn't get counted on the census. But how many people know, speaking of that plantation owners were required to count the amount of slaves they had on their property with the census? And that slavery, if I can say this, was somewhat regulated. So you just couldn't show up somewhere with your slaves and say, hey, here, I got slaves. You had to register your property with whatever county you were in. You had to list the number of slaves you had on that property. All plantations had to be armed according to the law. And according to the Georgia state slave laws, and you can find this and I've talked about this before, the Georgia State Archives site, which I highly recommend people go check out. Very informative. You learn a lot. But there were laws in the Georgia state slave laws that prevented a plantation owner. This is not to defend slavery here. Okay, so I just need to make that clear. But there were laws that prevented a plantation owner, slave owner, from maiming or injuring a slave. It was against the law to do so. Slaves were expensive. But the whole idea, pardon me, that and forgive me if it seems like I'm all over the place here. Like I said, the Wi-Fi is not working, so some of the resources I'd like to have for this video, I don't have with me. But from everything that I've studied, that I've read, the secession documents, the Cornerstone speech, all the normal stuff, it becomes apparent that it was more than just slavery, and that slavery was one of those issues that was being debated. And you had other things going on too. For example, Florida, and I've talked about this before, was concerned about its fisheries, as were a lot of southern states. But the idea of a lost cause, well, if what the South was doing by defending itself as a lost cause, then 1776 is a lost cause, the American Revolution, because all 13 colonies practiced slavery in 1776. In fact, George Washington was so hot damn mad at the British for taking his slaves, he said, you can't do that. You can't do that. He was out for blood. You can't take my slaves. Figuratively speaking. But the idea that there was this lost cause, look, after a war happens, or any conflict, you're going to have people from both sides who are going to try to romanticize what happened during the war. That just happens. We saw it happen after World War II. Best way to put this, because I write music in my spare time, Just an example here. You have this debate in the music world right now, the classical music world, with the period instrument people. So what they have or what they try to do is recreate what it would have sounded like, let's say in Beethoven's time. Mozart, Beethoven's time, Haydn. Well, we don't know because we really have no audio record of that. There was no recording industry in the time in which they lived. Probably the best or closest possible sound you could get is the Paris Conservatory Orchestra, which was one of the few orchestras that survived after World War II, because a lot of these art institutions or orchestras in Europe post-World War II were decimated. So the American orchestras, they became number one. New York Philharmonic, Minneapolis Symphony, the Chicago Symphony, you name it. The Philadelphia, which is my favorite orchestra. But these orchestras rose to the top, whereas they were decimated over in Europe because of the war. And a lot of things that Americans did in the war that are questionable. Just as what happened in Afghanistan after 9/11, or what happened in Iraq with the Iraq War. So you're always going to have people, and again, forgive me if it seems like I'm all over the place. You're going to have people who are going to romanticize things from either side. Yes, you had people like Jacob Early, but if you want to know what was really going on during the Civil War, you've got to read the primary documents. I mean, Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederacy, said, "We are not fighting for slavery, we're fighting for independence, and it's that or extermination we will have." Jefferson Davis said that, and he was pretty consistent on his viewpoint. Now, yes, he said that slavery was a benevolent institution, because at the time, that's what people thought. Just as they thought that indentured servitude was a way out for people in poverty. Just as they thought that workhouses were the best thing for the poor in Victorian England. So you got to look at things in the context of how they happen. But this idea of a lost cause? Lost cause, my foot. Now, yes, you had groups like the KKK, which came post-Civil War. See, everybody believes that the Civil War happened at the same time the KKK, same time as secession. That's not what happened at all. South Carolina was the first state to secede in December of 1860. Other states followed. The majority of southern states seceded before April 1861, which is when the war happened. I believe it was like April 14th. Isn't it the day that the Titanic sunk? So at any rate, as I said, I'm all over the place. I know. No notes. How am I doing for a no-note video, right? Usually I have stuff with me to help me do the videos here, but as you know, I do these in one take, and I'm just giving you my perspective here. But let's talk about what happened with Fort Sumter. Why did South Carolina fire at Fort Sumter? Well, if you live in an area that's along the coastline, or you live in any type of harbor, you realize how vulnerable that area can be from the elements, from invading force. I mean, every year we have Gasparilla in Tampa Bay. So shout out to all my friends, everybody listening in Tampa Bay. The invasion of the pirates in Tampa Bay, the big celebration they do down south. It's a lot of fun. But if you my point is, if you live in that type of area, or you live along the coast, you realize how vulnerable you can be. And I can just imagine at a time when you didn't have cell phones, or you didn't have the internet, you didn't have automobiles or airplanes, all you had was telegraph. The telephone hadn't yet been invented. You're going to feel somewhat vulnerable. And in my humble opinion, Lincoln should have not gone down to Fort Sumter, because at that time, even though Fort Sumter was federal property, it was in a state that seceded, an independent state. This brings up the issue of federal property in states. I don't think federal property should be in states. It should be, and I've talked about this before, it should be in D.C., away from these states. States are supposed to be sovereign and independent. So when you put everything in context, we really can't call what happened with the South 1861 to 1865 a lost cause, or say that people were trying to preserve a quote-unquote lost cause. Again, people are going to romanticize what happened during war, post-war, from either side. It is what it is. This happened with ancient Greece, this happened with ancient Rome, Egypt, you name it. They're all going to, try to preserve the glory days, so to speak. We do that now. Our old stomping ground back in high school, when the reality was, looking back, the reality was much different. But we like to look at things that way, through rose-colored glasses, because that's just what humans do. Thank God we don't have slavery, or we don't have indentured servitude. But there really was never a lost cause. If that were the case, again, the American Revolution is null and void. And the truth is, a lot of people aren't going to like hearing this, the truth is we are all Confederates, because we had something called the Articles of Confederation, the idea that we have a union of states. If you look at the U.S. Constitution, it doesn't call this a nation, it says to create a more perfect union. A union of what? Of free and independent states. See, the states have always been sovereign and independent, able to take care of their own affairs no matter what that issue is. And in 1860, 1861, under the Constitution, slavery was legally recognized. So the South, at the time, in their mind, wasn't doing anything wrong because slavery was legally protected. As it was under the Constitution when it got ratified in 1789 to 1791. I believe it was New York that really passed the first, I think there was like Rhode Island or something, but New York, if I'm not mistaken, was the first state to have a concrete abolition law in place. But most of those slaves weren't free. Not the living slaves. It'd be the son or daughter, offspring of the slave after so many years of service. So you do the math, and where does that lead you? Takes you up to the 1840s, 1850s, 1860. So look at things in the context of what happened then, what was going on technologically, what was in the Constitution, what was legally allowed, how people viewed things. Because remember, for a lot of these people in 1860, the American Revolution in 1860, was very fresh in their minds. It's like Pearl Harbor to us now, Pearl Harbor and 9/11. That's how people viewed things. So, being someone who was born and raised in the South, I can look at things from all different perspectives, including the Southern perspective. I can look at what was happening in New York, what people were arguing during the ratification debates. In order to understand the South's position in 1860, you have to go back to Thomas Jefferson. You have to go back to people like Patrick Henry. Do we want to be a union of we the people, or a government of we the states? Lincoln wanted to centralize everything, give more power to the center, power that was originally granted from the states via convention, who created this thing called the federal government. You see, the states came first. The states came first. That means that the states have the right to secede. They have the right to leave whenever they want. They are under no obligation, ever have been, to stay in this thing called the United States. If California wanted to leave tomorrow over immigration, they could do it. And that is a way to do it if you want to get back at Trump. And Trump can't do a damn thing about it because there's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits secession. Again, states are supposed to be sovereign and independent. That's a lost cause, and I don't know what is. So I thought I'd share this with you. Don't want to ramble on. As I said, doing this in one take today. Just tell you my view on this. So forgive me again for seeming like I'm all over the place. But if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. You can follow me at Instagram, #JasonComposes. because I write music in my spare time. Go to X, Culture Confederacy, at Culture Confed 1 on X. Now you can find me at Substack. This is the Culture Confederacy saying peace out. Stay safe, everybody. God bless this thing called the United States. I'll catch you next time, and you'll have a great Monday. Take care.